So I just got through watching two documentaries. Well, no, I didn't get through watching the second one. I finished the first one. It was Beauty and the Bester. It's on Netflix. It's a three-part limited series. I believe it's three parts. And yeah, check it out if you have the time. The second one, my sister sent me this link, and it's essentially this woman. She makes her own little mini clips on YouTube, and she created a playlist, and each is about 10 minutes, and I think it's about like 20 parts, about 10 minutes each. I got to episode, probably the beginning of the episode, the beginning of part 3 in that one, and I just had to cut it off. I was just like, it's too much. And so I wanted to do this. I was initially going to do a video, but I never get around to editing these videos. And then they always end up being really long. So I was like, well, I'll do like a audio recording and see how I can like put this to something. Maybe it'll be easier and I'll eventually get it uploaded to my YouTube. So essentially these two are basically, so the first one, once you watch it, you'll kind of understand why I'm kind of a little iffy about kind of like putting these two categories together. But essentially, I would say that they kind of fit in together because there are these men in these two, in both of these stories, that are in some way have a history of scamming women. Like that's their thing. And then also with both of them, it kind of leaves me, or definitely from what I've heard about the one that's on YouTube, is that it was kind of questionable to people that knew her, because it's in a way where outsiders would say that it's obvious that something is going on with this man, and they can tell. And so they were like, either she is in on it with him, or she doesn't really know. And so I think with both stories at the end, I was still kind of like questioning like what role, the first one, at the end of the first documentary, The Beauty and the Bester, I was definitely still at the end questioning like what exactly were her role in this whole process, and like what percentage of the victim versus the villain is she? The main woman that he targeted. But I don't want to go too into details about each of these because it's too much. Like, it's going to have to be their own video for each one. But it just made me think about how people can possibly fall into these types of situations. And I think for both, it on the surface, as like a viewer, watching the first documentary, 3 parts on Netflix, and then just getting into three or four clips of it, including the introduction, where I was like, it seems like there's a major desperation when it comes on the women's parts, getting involved with these men, because in the first one, like, even if she was completely 100% on board with helping this guy scam people, it's like the need to want to do that, to get yourself involved in that, to put your family and friends at risk, to put your career at risk, your freedom at risk. It's like, what are you lacking in your life that you would seek this out, or that you would see that all those decisions a viable option to do. Because even if they are a bad person, it's like, what is the appeal to this life? So clearly there's something that's in your reality that you're not happy with, or you're not satisfied with, or you're not feeling fulfilled with, to where you would drop that and then seek out something else that's so far removed from what you present to the world as your life, your truth. And so it's like, well, you have to be on the search for something. You have to feel like that life, that person has something valid to offer you. And I was watching the first documentary, and there was a woman, I believe she may have been like a detective, and she said it several times, and it just stuck with me. And she said something along the lines of like, you know, the main character, she was allegedly successful and smart and talented, and she was doing well in life, and she was married, and she had kids, and you would assume that she's happy with this life, that she's happy. And the woman says, you know, the detective, she said, what is the appeal for this man that has nothing to offer you? The man was doing life in prison for murder, rape, and fraud. And, you know, she was like, and she said it, or maybe it was the same clip repeated, but it was said at least twice. And he was like, this man has nothing to offer you. It's like, what is the appeal to that? And it feels like it's when someone is able to manipulate you, there is this illusion, or that the person manipulating you can create this illusion that they do have something to offer you. They build up whatever it is, the image they want to project. They say whatever they think that you need to hear, whoever it is that you need them to be. And so they appear to have something to actually offer you. And then the person that they are manipulating, there's something that they're lacking, and they're seeking out in this person who most people would say has nothing to offer them. This guy was in prison. He was doing life in prison, in a maximum security prison. And he wasn't, no chance of parole, like he wasn't going to get out. And so he's really limited in what he can offer you, what he could offer her. But again, what was it? I feel like it could have been something emotional, a mental aspect, because she first reached out to him when they were in prison. At least I don't understand how these two main characters these two people in the first documentary on Netflix, how they actually met. I don't know. It's kind of sketchy because I didn't get a lot of proof on how they actually met, but like they connected. Like there's proof of them actually connecting when he was in prison, already been convicted, and she's a free woman on the outside. He's in a maximum security prison. And so it's like only thing that he can offer you is like some type of emotional connection, some type of emotional aspect, because he physically can't be there for you. Even if you visit him, you're still limited in the contact you can have. And then again, you visit him, it's maybe, it's a limited time. So it felt like there's something emotional that she was seeking out, and that this person could provide for her. Because it seems like on the outside she already had, this, she was able to, she had a family, she had friends, she had a career, she had a life on the outside. So it's like, aren't all those needs met? So what is lacking that you're not getting in your outside world that you would seek to reach out to a man in prison. Like, what? It's a crazy situation. And it's really sad. And then in the second one, the one that's on YouTube, I don't know about that one. I did the introduction and then it's part 1, 2, and 3. So in total, that's like 4 videos. And there's like at least 20. And so I'm just trying to, and I just got frustrated with this main character because just in the brief 4 videos that I watched, I noticed red flags already, and I was just like, oh my God, just kind of, this guy kind of just sets up, she was a mark from the very beginning, and I couldn't do it. I just had to I was like, let me click off of this because I'm already getting upset. I was just like, why did this go that far? But again, this woman, the one in YouTube, she's like, I have a strong family, a healthy family, healthy, close relationship with family. She has friends. She has a career. She's living in Dallas, Texas, working in real estate and tech. Seems like a smart woman, and I did find out, because she mentioned it in one of the videos, maybe the introduction, but she was a contestant on The Bachelor. And so she has, she's built this life for herself. And, it's like, well, is it financial things that she's lacking? That's sort of that, what is it? I know that both seems like these extreme case of desperation. It's like what your mind can go to when you're desperate for certain things that you're lacking and that you don't have in your life. And I was like, well, what is it that she's lacking? What is it that's lacking in her life? And I think, just from the 4 episodes, 4 parts, maybe it's also emotional. She's able to provide. She was able to provide for herself. She's working jobs. She has a support network, a family and friends to fall back on. It's like, well, it's not financial. It seems like she's doing well enough for herself. But she did go on The Bachelor, so I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's the love. Like, maybe that's what it is. It's emotional. Going on The Bachelor, because so the idea of women, and I guess men too, the idea of going on The Bachelor and competing with people for the attention of someone, hoping they'll fall in love with you, that feels very, very desperate, so, maybe that's my speculation. Like, maybe that's what it is, because it's putting yourself kind of like this ridicule and kind of competing for someone's attention and having people like pick you apart on TV, and then having the person you're whose attention you're vying for, having them sort of like pick you apart as they pick apart the other women, and kind of like, well, who's the best person? Who's the best? It was, it's kind of a desperate thing to do. So I mean, it's kind of like right in line for her to sort of be, to find herself in a situation like this. Like, it's kind of like the pipeline to being, I don't know, like the pipeline for being scammed or whatever. But I started, because when I was thinking about what kind of united these two stories together, and I was like, well, what is it that they were looking for? And I was like, it's, or not, no, I didn't think, what is it they're looking for? I was thinking like, what did I say to myself? I was like, what? No, I was thinking, I realized, I was like, both of these situations seem like desperate situations, things you do when you're desperate for something. And I was like, well, I've thought about this in the past, when I was thinking about, when I first had the idea of a safe space where women can talk about how to date safely and how to keep yourself safe when you're dating. And I had the idea of like emotionally safe, and then it's like emotional safety and physical safety. And one of the top things that came to my mind was that how being desperate, how lacking things in your life can make you desperate, and then in turn, desperation makes you do some very dangerous things. It puts you in very dangerous situations, and it it's it it makes people do very high risk things that, looking back, especially with the second woman, and that's the YouTube series, I was just like, she's doing kind of what I would consider, I mean, I'm not a risk taker. And so, maybe that's why my alarm bells are going off. But then I was like, emotionally, more so than physically, but emotionally, she's putting herself in very high risk situations. And then again, that's what desperation makes you do, because you're not thinking with a clear head. Because with desperation, even when things aren't, life threatening or like you physically need these things to survive, desperation makes you believe that you need these things to survive. And sometimes you actually do, but then sometimes you don't. But that desperation puts you in like survival mode. In survival mode, you may do things that are high risk. You may do things that you may not fully think through, but you're doing these things because you're in survival mode and you think that you need to do them to survive, because that's what your mind is telling you. That's what you feel your body is telling you, that you need this. And that may not always be the case in the situation. But, again, when it comes to like lacking finances or maybe lacking housing or access to certain resources, it's a real possibility that you may need these things to survive. You may need these things to feel safe. You may need these things to pay your bills so you have a roof over your head. But essentially, desperation, it's what you do when you feel like you need something. And it can be real or imagined. But when it comes to being physically and emotionally safe, I think it's about recognizing vulnerabilities. And desperation is definitely a vulnerability. But there are things in your life, there are things that can happen to you, there are situations that can happen to you that make you vulnerable and put you in situations where you're like desperate for help or desperate for support or desperate for love or desperate for attention. There are real, valid, real life things that can happen. And it puts us in situations where we don't make the best choices. But two of the big things, I don't have my notes on in front of me, but I wrote a whole thing. And when I first started talking about a group, making I want us to be in person, but then also like virtual. But my main focus was making an in-person space where women can be safe and talk about their concerns and issues that are centered around emotionally safe dating, emotionally safe relationships. Let's put it like that, because it doesn't always have to be romantic, but emotionally and physically safe relationships. And then I focused on like, okay, well, what makes our situations the most safe or the most unsafe? What makes things the most unsafe for us? And I don't know how I got to this conclusion, but I think I was just like writing stuff down. And then I was like, okay, well, how can I, categorize this? How can I put this, like, what is the connection between these things that make people feel unsafe in dating, or that I hear about people being in unsafe situations, or situations where I myself have been in that were unsafe? And I just, I reflected on my personal experiences and things I had maybe seen in like these documentaries, stories that I've heard from other people that I know in my life. But there was this common factor. And it was just kind of these things where people are desperate. They're in vulnerable times, vulnerable situations, vulnerable positions. And I was just like, well, what are these vulnerable situations that people are getting in? And a lot of times it came back to people. So physically, how do people get into these vulnerable situations? And then I think when I would see situations where it's younger people, younger women, a lot of times it was due to lack of life experience. And in situations where it's lack of life experience, that's where your support network comes in, your friends and your family, your loved ones, people that love and care about you. That's where that comes in. And then I realized that not everybody has that, because when you're out on your own and you're navigating the world for the first time, you're not going to have a life experience. And so you're relying on what the people in your life have taught you to how to stay safe. So when they send you out into the world, that you can sort of somehow navigate it without them being there. And then you can also kind of fall back on them and ask them for advice. But what if you don't have that kind of relationship with people? What if you don't have those people in your life, period? What if the people that you do have in your life, that are your family and your friends, are toxic and they don't really have safe or they don't have the safe advice to give you? You know, the advice they're giving you is not the right advice. It's not the advice that's going to keep you safe. And so that biggest aspect on the lack of a life experience is the lack of having a support system and having people you can fall back on, people you can trust, people you can go to, people that in your younger years would have taught you either indirectly or directly, have taught you something about how to survive out in the world on your own. And then a lot of people don't have that. So they get out in the world on their own and they fall prey to people that they may not would have if they'd had that sort of teaching on what to do and what to look out for and the warning signs. So that was a big thing. It's like not having those kind of people in your life to give you the right direction. And so then I was like, well, I can create this resource. I can be this source of information. And it started off just gathering stuff that I had found online, advice that I had been given online, things that I have searched out for my own that I found like, hey, this is good advice. You know, maybe I should do this next time. Advice that I had found online. And so it was like gathering all these resources together to put them in one place and to have that available to where I could easily retrieve that and share with other people. You know, just to write things that I've learned, things that I've learned from, you know, my own life experience and things that I've been told by others, information that I found. And so that, you know, when people come to me or when I'm presenting some type of information or presenting resources to people, that I can easily, you know, retrieve that. I have that, you know, I know what to search for. I know what to look for. And so I was like, well, this can be a resource to people, to women who don't have that sort of resources or support network to fall back on. And then I think that was probably the major thing. And then I think next was identifying other ways that put us in vulnerable situations. Because I think the lack of family support and support structure, or having just people in your life that are not giving you the best advice, I think that was the main thing. But then I thought also of people that just fall into hard times or fall into situations where they just don't have access to money. And so they may do things that are not the safest thing to do, but they do it because they need money or they need housing or they need food. And this could be, and I think it's probably also a symptom of the first thing of not having a healthy, safe support network. But young women that may be out of necessity, they may need to get out on their own right away and be able to support themselves because they need to get out of their home life may not be the best. And so they may have to rush out and get out on their own and make do on their own and find a way on their own. Something like that, or maybe where people, maybe where a woman may have, lose her job and then she loses her house. And then, this man comes into her life and he's like, well, you can, they start a relationship, they start dating. And, he's like, well, you can move in with me or I can support you. And then that may create a situation where she may not have enough of her own money to get out on her own if the relationship becomes bad. And then, you may have someone that, essentially may end up on the street because they're trying to get away from a situation. And they, find themselves in, getting involved with someone who doesn't have the best intentions for them. But they stay in a situation because they don't have the resources to get out. And so I was like, okay, well, that is like, that's definitely something that can make you feel vulnerable. So I put that in like a category of like the importance of gaining financial independence. And I think, I don't have my notes with me. Let me see if I can look it up real quick because I had it better organized. Okay, so the 3 things that I wanted to focus on when I was thinking about, because I thought about the things that make us vulnerable. And that's the biggest thing that puts us in high risk situations where our relationships, where we're just in situations, in spaces that are not safe. And like I was saying, like the financial independence, but I labeled it like self-sufficiency. So putting a high importance on being able to be self-sufficient. And so I was thinking, that's the second one. So the first thing was education. And so the best thing that can increase your ability to be self-sufficient is having education. And then you can get a job. And then you get a job. And then you can save money and earning your own money independent of of your money in the relationship or the money that your spouse or whoever you or your family makes, but you have your own source of money to be able to support yourself. And then in terms of being able to earn your own income, you can have your own house, you can have your own housing. So being able to have your own living space, I think is very safe for women, so that if you're in a relationship and you leave the relationship, you still have your own place. And so whether or not you stay in the relationship isn't dependent on you. It's not on like your housing. I don't know how to word that in a way that makes sense, but so that your housing isn't dependent on you staying in this relationship that may be unhealthy. So if the relationship ends, you still have your own house. You're not going to be put out on the street. And so that way you're not put in a vulnerable situation, for example. And then this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, and when emotional or mental desperation, like that need for like an emotional connection with someone or to feel love and to be loved. But good mental and physical health. And so I combined those 2 things because it's our health. Mental and physical health should be something that's permanently linked together. Like you can't have good physical health and then you can't have good health if you have good physical health, but you don't have good mental health, and then vice versa. Because I feel like having mental health issues that are not being properly treated or aren't properly diagnosed, or trauma that hasn't been worked through, that can cloud our decision making. And it goes back to things that can put you in vulnerable positions. And the thing also with physical health, by not taking care of our physical health, and then that also ties back to self-sufficiency, but being able to take care of your mental and physical health, and it's not dependent on somebody else. So it's not dependent on whether or not, so say like you're in a relationship and you're the only one working, and so your whole health insurance, your access to health is dependent on your spouse and their job, and you don't have a job or you don't have income to where you can go out and buy insurance. And so that again can place you where you're dependent on this relationship to get access to medical treatments or medication and things like that. And then also, I would say that this would also cover people that may have a severe disability and they need access to care, whether they may get into a relationship with someone who may be telling them that, hey, I can, you're disabled and you may not can work at all, or your ability to work and earn income yourself is limited. And this person's like, hey, I can support you. You can come live with me. You'll have housing. We can, get this relationship together, and I'll support you in your disability. And then again, you get in situations where your ability to treat your condition, your access to care is dependent on this person, and they may not be someone you need to be with, but like you can't leave because your care is dependent on if you stay with this person or not. And the way the situation is set up in America, a lot of people are in vulnerable positions like that. Like, that's not unheard of. And then you have, people where they're getting abused, where they're getting, financially abused, or they're, I remember reading somewhere that people that are disabled, they have, a high, their chance of being abused is very high. Because again, if they're disabled, the way this system is set up in America, it can be very hard for them to achieve, independence and to be able to support themselves. And so it makes it really hard for them if they get in a situation they can't get out. And so there are people that are not very nice people, and they can prey on people like that because they know, oh, if I can do whatever this person, they're not going to easily be able to escape. They're not going to be able to get away. And then even if they want to get away, it may not seem like a realistic option for them. So those are lots of things. And then, going back to health, take care of your health. Stay on top of your health, because you don't want to be in such a, to ignore your health and be in a situation where you've ignored your health for so long. There's this desperation of, I need to get care right now, or I need to get money right now, or I need to rush into this relationship with someone because I need access to medical care, I need access to a place to stay, or I really want someone to care about me because I'm in this situation, or, I have this very severe medical condition now because I may have not taken care of my health. And it's like, well, who else am I going to get to be there for me? Who else am I going to get to love me if I'm this bad a shape, I'm in this bad a condition? And so, you can end up in situations that are not very safe. And so I really wanted to create this kind of space where research and advice is shared on, what we can do, how we can help each other and support each other, and really just share advice and guide people to try to guide women to be able to make better decisions, to make good decisions, safe decisions, and put themselves in safe positions, and give them actionable things that they can actually do, to the best that they can do to ensure that they put themselves in these safe positions and avoid the unsafe positions. But having tools and resources and things that we can share and tell each other, but have an environment where people they feel welcome, they feel safe, and they feel like it's a place they can come to and not feel ridiculed or belittled or feel attacked or feel, that they're not going to be ignored. People can help them and be there, when they're ready to receive the advice. So just like these vulnerable situations that people can get in, and they end up being situations like these women that are in these documentaries. And I think Netflix is supposed to be, my sister told me that Netflix is in the works with making a documentary about the woman that was on the former contestant on The Bachelor, and she had her YouTube playlist series made that she did herself, recorded herself, that there was something in the works with Netflix. So, that may be the next thing. But if you Google it, it's called The Danish Deception. That's the one that's on YouTube. And the one that's on Netflix is called Beauty and the Bester. And it takes place it starts in South Africa. But they're just hopping all over Southern Africa, the Southern Africa. But yeah, it's like, it's a completely different culture, but it's the same old story. It's the same old, if you've watched other documentaries, there's some wild things that happen in the Beauty and the Bester, but essentially at its core, it's what's happened to multiple women. It's the scammer con man 101. It's the same plays that they do. I would probably categorize both of these as like, like a romance scam? But also I would say so these two kind of are like romantic romance scams. But I want to say that I saw another documentary that is not romantic couple, but it is a love scam because it's called the Con Mom. And it's with this guy who had this woman reach out to him and say she was his birth mother, who he never met. And so that too is like a love scam, a love con. It's just not romantic. It's not between, a romantic couple, because it's this man who never met his biological mom, and this woman contacts him out of the blue and says she's his mom. And it still involves like love and that manipulation, that it's something, and people make fun of people about this all the time, but I feel like it's a basic human need, or it's a basic human, what do I call it? What would I say? It's a basic human desire, that it's a natural thing. It's something that makes us human because we form connections, we form relationships, we form bonds with people. That it's a very common thing, but people kind of like poke fun at, like, how could you fall for this? How could you, want to be, fall in love so hard? But I think people poke fun at it because it's like, it had a negative outcome because it was a scam. But people in healthy relationships, they do the same thing all the time. They fall hard in love. It just ends up being something healthy and safe versus something toxic and unsafe. But the same thing happens all the time. It's just no one pokes fun at it because in those other times, it ends up being something good. It has a good outcome, But it's like this basic human desire to want to be loved and to love other people, to have that mutual exchange of love, to love someone, and then because you love someone, that person in turn loves you back. And when it comes to like the guy from Con Mom, I think it was called Con Mom. It was also on Netflix. He lived with his dad his whole life, and so he had not a very good relationship with his dad, and he never met his mom. And this woman comes, she's this charming, charismatic woman, and she's giving emotionally and financially, and she comes out saying she has cancer and she's dying. And so he wants to be loved. He didn't have the relationship with his dad. He grew up with a very harsh relationship with his dad. And so there's a strong desire to be loved by a parent. And that was the one parent he haven't met. And so he's like, well, maybe this is my chance to have a parent, to have someone that loves me. And then also I think that sort of this is my chance. Oh, someone's loving me, and then I have this chance to fulfill the desire to return that love back. And so it's like I can care for her while she's dying, and like this is really gonna make her love me. So kind of I can do these things and I can be there for this woman in need, and then she'll in turn love me back. And then, with these other two documentaries, these other two stories that I've followed recently, and then, I don't really know their whole story, their background, or their family life. But maybe there's also something lacking in with their relationships, whether they're romantic or platonic or familial. Maybe that there's something, I suspect, that's my suspicion, that there's something lacking because they seem like they came from loving families, but you never know, The lady on The Bachelor, she said that she looked really young still, but that she hadn't, before she met the guy, the scammer, that she hadn't been in any serious relationships. So, I think her need for love was like a romantic, definitely. And a lot of people will tell you, don't worry about romantic relationships. You have your friends and you have your family and stuff. And that's not enough for a lot of people. And it's very common and valid for that not to be enough, because your romantic relationships and your familiar relationships are very different than romantic relationships, obviously. But also the role that the totem or the relationship hierarchy. Once you become an adult, romantic relationships are at the top of the hierarchy. Once you get married to your spouse, your partner, it's like that's your family now. That's what you're taught, and that's what's indirectly and directly told to you, is that once you are an adult and you get into a romantic relationship, that person is now your family. They're supposed to be your priority. And then your family and your friends become, they move from the first place down to second and third. So I say romantic relationships, when you become an adult, romantic relationships become number one. And then family, and then friends are down at the bottom. And then those positions can rearrange depending on whether or not you're single at the time, whether or not you even have a relationship with a family, whether you have a lot of friends, what season of your life that you're in. Those positions can switch or flip, or maybe you only have two positions in the relationship hierarchy. There's only family and friends. Maybe there's only family and romantic relationships because you don't have any friends. It just, but like, let's be real. Like, The way relationship hierarchy is set up, at least culturally in the Western world, the common way that it's set up in relationship hierarchy is that once you become in a romantic relationship, that should be your priority. And so if you're in your friend group or you're in your family group and you don't have a romantic relationship and the other people in your life do, their romantic relationships are going to take a priority because that's the relationship hierarchy, is that your partner becomes the most important person in your life. There's no, and then I know that, nowadays there are people that are reframing and redefining the relationship hierarchy, that it's not a vertical, but it's like a, I don't know, I guess like horizontal, where everyone's kind of, all your relationships are kind of on an equal plane instead of one being above the other. There are people that are doing that, but it's still very common for romantic relationships to be at the top of the hierarchy, for it to be a vertical tier and romantic relationship at the top. And so, in your life sometimes, because of the people that you may care about, your family and friends, they're in a romantic relationship, those relationships take a priority over friendship or over familiar relationships. So people will say that, friendship in your family should be enough if you don't have a relationship. But clearly that's not enough for a lot of people, because a lot of people are still seeking out romantic relationships because their familial and platonic relationships are not filling the void of time, of care, of availability, of being emotional and like physically present in each other's lives. It causes this like shift in importance, and so it's like you kind of, it's hard because of the relationship hierarchy that's in at least American culture. That's the only culture I can speak for. Because of the hierarchy of romantic relationships, sometimes there's left a void of how people can show up for you if they're not your romantic partner, or they're not your family, they're not blood related. So that can leave a void, and so people can end up seeking out romantic relationships to fill that void of someone that's always going to show up for you, where you're their number one person, where you're not a backseat, you're not a second priority, a second choice. And so people are still, they're always going to seek out romantic relationships, always, but still, I think that there's not going to be a point where, I don't know, there's just not a point where it makes sense right now that people can't understand why people are going so hard for these romantic relationships, because there's clearly a void there's a void that's not filled. There's a space in these people's life, in everyone's life, where your friends and your family cannot show up or are not allowed to show up in the same way as a romantic partner. That it's taboo, that it's they may see it as being disrespectful to the other people in their life that are supposed to be their priority. It's not, it's not acceptable, and how you form your circle. It's just, there are things that are in place to where this void is created because there are people in your life that is not acceptable for them to show up in that way, to be that way, that there's a social structure, there's a social norm, and you feel like you have to seek out certain relationships because other relationships are not allowed to show up or not allowed to be that way for whatever reason, for the culture, society, religion, things like that. And so people are always going to, unless things change, people are always going to go hard for romantic relationships. And they're always going to seek them out. And sometimes things make us desperate, and they do make us do things that are not safe for us to do. And we fall prey to a scammer because we have this strong desire, this strong push for relationships, to have connection, to love people and to be loved, even if it's not romantic. You love your friends, you love your family. You don't just love your romantic partner. So like that desire to be loved, sometimes there's a void that the people that we do have in our life, they're not feeling it. They're not able to, or they're not allowed to show up in a certain way. And so then we seek out interactions and connections and relationships with people, sometimes usually out of desperation, because sometimes that void is really big. And sometimes it feels really bad when you have this big void. And it creates this desperation. And then we seek out people that may not be the best for us. Or we rush into things because we don't think clearly. We don't step back and fully assess. Sometimes I do feel that we're afraid to step back and ask for advice and ask for input because I think sometimes being vulnerable enough to share with people in your life that, because first of all, it can be kind of, accusatory. You are vulnerable enough, you tell them, I have like this emotional void. Like, I feel like I need this kind of relationship. I need these kind of actions. I need this kind of presence in my life. And if you're sharing with them, they're like, well, what is it that I'm not doing as a friend, or I'm not doing as a family member that's not enough? And now you need my advice because now you're seeking this out with someone else. And the situation that you're seeking out with this other person, they're being sketchy. I think they're like a con person, or I think they're scamming you. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you seeking this out with this person? And because of kind of like shame, and you don't want to put them, you don't want to like accuse them of like not being a good friend or not being a good whatever, a confidant or a good partner or whatever. And it's like, okay, why are you seeking out this interaction with this person now? Like, why are you going so hard? Like, why are you trying to do that? And so to be vulnerable enough to say that, hey, I'm lacking something in my life and I have this need that's currently not being filled by the people in my life, and the person that you're confiding to is one of those people. So now I'm seeking it out with someone else. It's kind of like creates like shame and sort of like embarrassment. And so you don't want to tell people, you don't want to be completely emotionally vulnerable, or you don't want to accuse them of not being a good person. And so a lot of times we don't step back and we don't ask for advice, or we don't ask for input, because we don't want people to know that we're going through something in our lives, so where there's this really big void and I really need help, or I really need connection, or I really need you to be there for me. And so you don't come to the people in your life, and instead you go to people outside of your life. And you may rush into these situations because you don't want to ask the people in your life for help or advice or guidance. So that's another thing. But it's definitely real. And I think, I don't know, it can happen to anyone. I think there's different, it's not always exactly the same way. Like, I mean, I did say like it's the scammer's playbook. They do these same kind of cons. But I think on the surface, they don't seem as it's the same playbook as what we've seen on TV, what we've heard from other people. But if you look just a little bit deeper, it is basically the same thing. Like, they are basically being manipulated by someone. And they're basically the victim is seeking out something. And this scammer is presenting themselves as what it is that the victim is seeking. And a lot of times they can figure out within a short time frame what exactly it is that the person is lacking. I mean, the go-to for women, at least, even if that's not the case, the go-to if you're trying to scam a woman, the go-to is to go through love, go through something emotional, make an emotional connection, emotional plea. That's gonna, even if that doesn't work, that would be the first thing you would do if you're a scammer and your target is a woman, or you're gonna target a woman. That's the first way you would do it. That would be your first guess. But I was watching, I don't know, I only saw like 4 parts, so it must have been within the 4 parts. I started looking at the comments because I was just getting frustrated. In the YouTube one, I started looking at the comments, and one of the things that someone did point out was like, he got all he needed to know from this woman, and to know how to scam her, to know where her vulnerabilities are. If he didn't know already, like if he made just like a guess and he wanted to be sure, he got everything he knew from her. He got everything he needed to get from her, to know about her within, I would say within a month. And probably, if I was like a professional, I could pick apart the conversation in real time. He probably had gotten a lot just within the first meeting, the first time they meet. And you do like small talk, and you start, sharing details about your life, about your family, and about what you do for a living. And they see how you talk about yourself, or how you talk about your family, how you talk about your career, and things like that, and like your body language, and and they can see if you're confident or if you're not. And when it's something that may show that you're not confident, that's the weakness, that's the vulnerability, that's where he's going to hit you the hardest. And I was like, you could probably tell a lot just within the first conversation, that she's someone that he can easily scam, or that, well, not that he can easily scam, but that if he was going to scam her, it's like, okay, well, this is some good information, this is good intel, I'm going to go ahead with this person, I'm going to go ahead and try to scam her, and then, instead of working on somebody else. But yeah, it was a typical, it seemed like, it's just like a chance encounter. They just happened to meet while they're both on, quote unquote vacation, because she was on vacation. I don't know if he was really on vacation. But it made it seem like it was a chance encounter, because it's not like a typical like a romance scam. It's not where I thought it was going to be like online and she never met this guy at all. Like the, some of the other ones, I was like, oh, they're just dating. She's never met this guy, but she actually met him in person. So I was like, okay, well, that's, it's a little bit different. But then as you go deeper, yes, it's a romance scam, but, he's also doing like the textbook, what's it called? Textbook, I just lost it. It's just slipped my mind. Textbook, textbook love bombing, where it creates this false sense of intimacy. So they met while she was like on vacation in Europe, and they met maybe like 3 or 4 times while she was on vacation. And then when she went back home, all of their interaction was virtual, like on the phone, texting, and, exchanging messages on social media. And so there was this like intense, quote unquote, courtship without actually courting, where they get to know each other over the phone, and creates like this sense of intimacy. Like, yeah, you're getting to know them and you're getting these details about their lives, but there's this whole aspect of a person that you're not getting to witness. And that whole aspect is getting to witness them in real time, in person, right in front of you. Because I don't know how to explain it, but it's very different than meeting someone virtually. Even like a video, like doing like FaceTime, where you're just FaceTiming. Yeah, you see this person sort of face to face, but you're not really face to face. You're not right in front of each other in person. And that's a different kind of level of, it's a level of interaction that can be difficult to deceive someone in person. It adds a layer of complexity. Meeting someone in person and interacting with them in person adds a layer of complexity that makes it slightly bit difficult for the manipulator to deceive. Because if you're somewhat, so like, and like even with video and like the audio and like phone or voice memos, like all of that is necessary. You know, like you combine it all, but it's just not the same of like getting to know someone in real time. And I also feel like it is, oh, this air condition is so loud. There's this level of, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, you know what? I think it's because in person, it's like you're combining all 5 of your senses, basically. Your sight, hearing, touch, and then emotional. And I think all of those are heightened when it's in real time, because it makes it a bit harder to rehearse or pre-think what you're going to do, what you're going to say, to prepare, I guess, because it's like in real time, and then you can sort of see if someone's like stammering, or if they're trying to think of something, and then you have body language, and you have eye contact or lack of eye contact. Like looking in someone's eyes, you can also tell a lot too. And so it heightens everything. And so I think you're better able to judge. And with scammers and con artists, even if you're not good at judging like body language and like mannerisms and all this different stuff, even if you're not really good at that, like I feel like in person, it still gives you a leg up. Like it still heightens and it still makes it easier, even if you're not good at it. Being in person, you still have a better ability to judge someone than you would without seeing them in person. And so I think the scammer's playbook is to move fast and do as much of the work as they can, not in person. Because once you're in person, and especially if you're trying to meet someone in person early on, I think it's harder to keep it up. It's harder to fool someone. And so it makes it easier for them to get called out. Also, in person, other people around you are going to like witness. Other people are going to notice things. And then when you're not interacting in person with the scammer, it's also kind of like you're being isolated. Like you're not, you're isolating your own senses. And then also you're isolating your other people from the interaction. And then in turn, because, I mean, even if they were there in person, listening to a phone call or watching on FaceTime, not being in person, still they're limiting their own senses. They're isolating their own senses to be able to make a good decision. And then another fact that I thought was really good, and I saved this from Reddit. Another thing that I didn't pick up on is that a lot of scammers, they will pick victims that are not from their culture. They're not from their region, not from their culture, not from their religion or whatever, because it's easier for them. It's harder for their victims to notice things that a native would notice. Like the person on Reddit said something like, I remember they said it would be harder for a foreigner to notice the con man or con woman, to know that their accent isn't a legitimate accent, or their accent is someone that's from a lower social class versus a higher social class. So they're not as well educated, or they're not from the background that they're saying they're from. And then the target who is not a native or not, from the same culture as the con person, they wouldn't be able to notice certain cultural aspects that are either incorrect or wrong, or that are just that this person is lying. They may not even be from the culture they're saying they're from, but the victim's not going to know because they're not from any of the culture. They're not from, they're not going to know the difference. And so that was probably a real big thing that made her a mark, because he knew that they were in Croatia. And he's like, and she's a black woman, or she's a black woman. She is, and I don't know what race or whatever her friend was, but I was like, well, maybe he picked her because she's a black woman and he knows she's not from Croatia. And so he was like, well, let me target her, And so I was like, wow. So it's like before they even interact, he already knows who he's going to target. He probably picked her over the friend she was with because maybe he could tell right away that she wasn't from Croatia. She's not a native Croatian. So he's like, well, let me pick on her. Because, he could have said like, oh, I'm from Croatia, I'm from wherever. But she's not going to know all about these different accents or culture. Like, he could just make up whatever. She's not going to know. She's not going to be able to at least quickly tell the difference. Maybe. So, yeah, like these scammers, these con people know who they're going to pick. And they know why they're going to pick a person versus over another person. And it's not uncommon for them to be very charming and charismatic and good looking, because that's that part of what reels people in. Because people respond very different to someone who they find attractive versus someone who they find unattractive. And that's a real thing in psychology and like society. So as long as it doesn't matter whether we find the con person attractive or not. If he walks up to her and he see her little eyes light up and she smiles, he already know that, hey, she's feeling me already, So it's like, let me go, because you can tell if someone's feeling you the moment you walk up to them, like how they interact with you, how they respond to you, if they smile at you, if they make eye contact with you. You can tell if someone's into you or not. So like, yeah, like he already knew that she was like into him on some level, that she visually found him attractive. So it's like, well, that's already, hey, I already got a good mark. I'm already 1 foot in the door. So yeah, so the rest of it is just, okay. And I feel like you can get away with a lot if the person you're trying to manipulate finds you attractive. Like you can get away with a lot. Like you can be a little bit charming. You don't have to be, the charm master. There's a little bit of leeway in that. So like you don't have to be really good at it. You don't have to be that good of a scammer. if the person finds you attractive. Yeah, so yeah, this has went on very, very long. So that's all that I really wanted to cover and talk about. And I don't know how I'm going to add this to like visually add this to something. But yeah, I do want to, and see how it turns out. See what I can do with it.